Hi, I'm Robert Muchamore. Thanks to all the fans who sent in questions for me to answer. And I'm going to get straight down with a question from Alex. And the question Alex asks is, do you feel that the internet has changed the way authors interact with their readers? I definitely think they have. I think one of the nicest things about the internet is before the internet came along, the only time an author would have a chance to interact with fans would basically be at, say, a book signing, or at a book festival or something like that, maybe when you do a school visit. But the internet opens up a lot of extra opportunities, and it means fans can send me emails, and it means that, I can go on Twitter and fans can read my tweets, they can follow me on my Facebook page, they can comment on my Facebook and I'll answer. So I think it's actually really nice that the internet opens up a whole extra level of communication between authors and their readers. The next question comes from Jack. And Jack's question is, what was the most important lesson you learned from becoming a successful author that you wished you know when you were just starting out? I think probably the most important thing to learn when you want to become an author is just about how to write books. And what I mean by that is there's a difference between what you write when you're at school and you just write something that's 1 or 2 pages, and turning that ability to write a very short story or a short essay into the ability to structure and create a book is probably the most difficult skill that you have to learn when you want to be a writer. People often ask me how you do it, and my answer is basically you just have to kind of practice and get used to it and study how other stories work. The next question is a slightly less serious one. It comes from Grace, and she asks, what is the quickest way to earn £5 million? My answer to Grace is that if I knew how to earn £5 million, I wouldn't be sitting here in my house answering your questions. I would be on some Caribbean island somewhere. So I don't know what the answer to that is, sorry. The next question comes from Hannah, and she says, what character in your books do you most relate to and why? The character that I relate to really easily is really the first character that I created in any of my books, James Adams in the Cherub series. What I always say about James is that James isn't who I was when I was a teenager. James is the guy that I wanted to be when I was a teenager. So I was like a skinny, geeky kid, and I got bullied a bit and I could never get a girlfriend. So I deliberately made James a cool guy who had loads of mates all the time and always had loads of girlfriends and was always really popular. And also with James, I've always made it so that my likes and dislikes always match James Adams's likes and dislikes. So I hate mayonnaise and ketchup, so James hates mayonnaise and ketchup. I've forgotten what the other ones are. Oh, Arsenal, of course, the biggest one of all is Arsenal. I'm a massive Arsenal supporter, and James Adams is a massive Arsenal supporter. So when you think about James Adams, he's basically the cool version of myself. The next one comes from James, not James Adams, a different James. And the question is, what's the best experience you've had since you became an author related to your books and career? I think there's been loads of special things that have happened and loads of fun things that have happened as an author. But I think just the one that sticks in my head, just because it's quite starry and it makes me feel like a bit of a celebrity, is when I arrived in Brisbane in about 2008. And it was the first event that I ever did in Australia. And I knew that my books had got really popular, but I didn't realise how popular they'd got till I did this event in Brisbane. And my publisher actually booked a limousine, and it was like this proper full-on like Hummer limousine with like 6 wheels and a bar inside. And it was just stupidly over the top, and we turned up at this shopping centre in the middle of Brisbane, and there were like about 400 people all queuing up to get their book signed. And when they saw me pulling up in the limousine, they were like all cheering and waving, and it was like being at a Hollywood premiere, not like at a little bookshop signing. So that was actually a really special moment because it kind of made me feel a bit big-headed and very proud of myself. The next question comes from Mason. And his question is, what made you decide to write your first standalone novel as opposed to the series structure of your previous books? I think really I wanted a challenge. I wanted to do something different. I'd written the Cherub series, I'd written the Rock War series, I'd written the Henderson's Boys series. And when it came to writing Killer Tea, I just wanted to do something different. And I like the idea of just being able to tell a story and sort of the complete story all in one book. It just felt like a new and fresh thing for me to do. And I must admit, I did find it quite hard to do because when you make a series of books, a lot of what you're planning, you plan at the start of the series, and then all your characters and your setups are there. When you write a standalone book, it's a lot harder because you have to make every single thing from scratch. And since I've written standalone books, Killer Tea and my new book Arctic Zoo, which are both standalones, I've actually come to appreciate just what hard work authors of standalone books have to put in. The next question comes from Heavy Gunk on Twitter. And the question is, what is the worst thing that's happened to you while promoting a book? This story is a bit embarrassing. It goes back about 7 or 8 years ago, and I did a book signing at a tiny little bookshop in a place called Hove, which is quite near Brighton. And it's one of those, I arrived at the bookshop, and I'd been travelling from London, so I needed to go to the loo. And the loo in the bookshop was just this tiny little loo that was like inside the bookshop, and there was this like really thin door that didn't even like go down to the ground. And I had to kind of bustle past the queue of people who were all queuing up to get their book signed at my book signing and slide into the loo. And then as I stood up from the loo, there was a big pile of toilet rolls on top of the toilet cistern, and I caught them with my elbow and I knocked all of the toilet rolls and they all went plop into the toilet bowl. So like I'm standing in the middle of this bookshop with a queue of fans like less than a metre away from where I'm standing, and I've basically got all this soggy loo roll and water pouring all over the floor, and it was all really rather embarrassing. The next question is from Christopher, and he asks, do you think children's books need a bit more bite in the 21st century? And do you think you've achieved it by covering more adult themes? I completely agree with what Christopher says. I really feel that kids' books, for older kids, need to have something a little bit more sophisticated to them. Because I think one of the great things about books is you can tell a story in a much more deep and intimate way than what you can with a TV show or with a YouTube clip or with any other medium. So what being a writer means is you can really actually explore those issues and open kids' minds up to things and challenge the way they think about things. And I think that's one of the things that makes books valuable to readers and also makes it really interesting actually writing the books for young people. The next question comes from Scene, and it's a very important one. Sean, asks, would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? Now, I get asked this question all the time. It's a very important question. And when I think about it, one horse-sized duck would be this big, giant, fearsome thing with a beak as big as my head, whereas 100 duck-sized horses would just be little things that run around and bumped into your legs. So my conclusion is that I would definitely rather fight the 100 duck-sized horses. And the last question comes from Tina, and Tina asks, you've said you've got no plans to write more cherub books, brackets boo-hoo. So what the blazes are you going to do next? Well, it is a bit sad that I've stopped writing cherub books now, but I've got a new standalone novel, Arctic Zoo, which is coming out in July 2019, and that's a book that I'm very excited about. And the big news is, in 2020, I'm going to be starting a brand new series that's going to be called Robert Muchamore's Robin Hood. And you might have guessed, based on the name, that it's based on Robin Hood. But it's not Robin Hood set in medieval times. It's actually a kind of radical new version of Robin Hood. And he lives in the present day with things like austerity and protest movements and all the kind of modern stuff. So thanks very much for all your questions, and I hope you enjoyed listening to that.